You know, we're trying to figure out some of this like functional pattern stuff. We're trying to figure out some of this GOATA movements and some of these just various movements. There's a lot of kind of shit stirring up on the internet, and you and I ended up getting into a lot of conversation. And so I just kind of wanted to have you on the show today just to have some real open dialogue about training and how someone can start to detect what they think will fit into their program best.
To be right, does everybody else have to be wrong? So, I mean, that's a serious question because you hear a lot of people talking about what's right, and I'm sure they believe that, but a lot of time through that process, they make everything else wrong.
Instead of totally getting rid of something else, like just totally stopping back squatting, how is there a way that maybe this can be included for someone, but it doesn't end up causing them more pain than benefit in the long term?
What did you notice with functional patterns that stood out to you that to make you want to try it? Because we both get trained by the same guy. We both get trained by John Mills.
I did some sessions with him, just, had him, show me some stuff. And I was like, this is really interesting. It definitely showed me that there were some holes in my game.
When someone's looking at that, what are some of the key things or key fundamental things that are going on that most don't understand?
Some of the stuff you were teaching us today, I'm like, I would love to be able to put that in practice. But by the time we get down to the end of the turf, I'm already kind of gassed. Like, I don't have that big gas tank right now. So how do I build that up?
I always start people off with a run walk program, and nobody wants to do it.
And we definitely have a lot of people in the audience that are getting more interested to running since Mark's doing a lot of running. How important are the mechanics of the way that the foot strikes the ground?
Why are people running? Are people picking up running because they're like, yeah, it's a basic human skill that we should all be proficient at? No. Why do they really want to run? Most people it's because they want to be skinny.
Would there be an ideal treadmill that would be good if you were a runner?
You mentioned to me 3 different ways of running that can really help people. And you gave me a book today about, backing off how fast you're running to run way faster.
How has your breathing over the years, and how do you breathe now when you run? What do you try to focus on?
So I hate breath work. I hate it.
What are some pretty cool concepts that you learned from GOATA? As you've been digging through that stuff, you're like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. So what have you been noticing? Like, this can apply really well to generally everybody that I work with.
Don't just start running, but, kind of approach this from a more holistic fashion. Like maybe we do need to be doing some soft tissue work if you don't move very well, or if you're super stiff, or if you sit for a job. Don't just buy shoes and start running. I'm not saying don't buy shoes and start running. I'm just saying do other stuff too.
Power Project family, how's it going? Now, we like to look good in the gym and out of the gym. That's why you always see Mark and I and Andrew is stepping up on the short game, wearing shorts from Viore and clothes from Viore. And honestly, the #1 compliment that I've seen, that I've gotten, and even Mark's gotten, is, damn, your butt looks good. And that's because, the clothes we wear make our booties look delicious. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yeah, you guys both have pretty big wagons. You guys can head over to viore.com/powerproject. That's VUORI.com/powerproject to receive 20% off the most amazing apparel that looks so good inside and outside of the gym.
It's going to make your ass look fat,
and your ass will look fat. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. God damn it.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Make your ass look fat.
Super white, we call that.
Now you're red.
Yeah.
He's got a reddish hue to him there.
Yeah.
No, it happens all the time too. Like I walked in today, like, oh my God, has anybody ever told you look like this guy? And I'm like,
it's just anyone with freckles.
Yeah. It's like if you have red hair, you look the ssame.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's all the same. The same demographic.
Is that racist though? That's what I want to know.
Of course, it's all racist. Do your kids? Did they inherit that? Or you can't tell?
Well, I can't tell because I didn't try to have kids.
Oh, you don't have any kids?
Yeah. No, the genes stop here, man.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
All right, so I'll never know. What about when you were young? Because sometimes when people have red hair, they have kind of blondish hair when they're young.
No,
or like whitish hair almost.
I was red.
You're red forever.
Oh, yeah, the whole way.
Right out of the gate. Like red?
Yeah, real red.
You ever done 23andMe to know where all that comes from? Or no?
No, somebody gave me a test one time, but we didn't take it.
He's African. It's clear. it's quite obvious.
There are some albino Africans that have pale skin and red hair. That's a thing.
Yeah. We have I think my mom's side is kind of German and maybe Swedish, and my dad's side has a lot of English, and my uncle pretends he's Scottish. I think it goes back somewhere in there. It's all Celtic, but it's European mutt for sure.
All right. Well, we got Ryan here on the show today because, we're trying to figure out some of this like functional pattern stuff. We're trying to figure out some of this GOATA movements and some of these just various movements. There's a lot of kind of shit stirring up on the internet on who's got it right. And we have some of the guys have been around for a long time. You got like Paul Chek, you have Kelly Starrett, you have some of these guys that have been sharing great information. And I've been a person who has always liked to try to take on some of that information and try it for myself and say, let me see how this like factors in like what I'm doing. Can these things help make me better? And through that process, can I help make other people better? Or can I give people ideas that could potentially help them with pain? We also have Graham Tuttle, the barefoot sprinter here. And Graham has kind of showed us the importance of just letting the feet be feet, just getting out of your shoes whenever you can, allowing your feet to have some toe splay and to be able to wiggle your toes all around, much the same way that you can move your hands around. But sometimes some of this stuff can be difficult to know who to trust or what to try or where to start. And you and I ended up getting into a lot of conversation. I met you years ago, but we kind of reunited at Say in Strength more recently. And so I just kind of wanted to have you on the show today just to have some real open dialogue about training and how someone can start to detect what they think will fit into their program best without being too dogmatic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a couple of important questions around that, as they come up. One is, to be right, does everybody else have to be wrong? It's a serious question.
Yeah.
But it seems like whenever something new comes around, there's this kind of wholehearted rejection of what came before it. And definitely I saw that, towards the beginning of CrossFit. You got into CrossFit and there was a lot of rejection.
Move this closer to you a little bit.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, there was a lot of rejection, kind of what we would consider a more traditional style of training at the time, more bodybuilding oriented. And now you see a lot of, incorporation of many different modalities of training in CrossFit. And so, I mean, that's a serious question because you hear a lot of people talking about what's right. And I'm sure they believe that, but a lot of time through that process, they make everything else wrong. So
when you and I were talking just a couple days ago, we were talking about squat, bench, deadlift. And I know that you even like some Olympic lifting and obviously the CrossFit background and stuff. But you mentioned, you were like, I have absolutely seen these movements be transformative for people. And so some of what we're seeing with the shift of these movement patterns and these various things that people are getting into, maybe some of the knees over toes stuff. And I'm not saying that Ben Patrick has said to not do those movements because he certainly hasn't said that. But I think people are in favor of a lot of these quote unquote functional movements more than they were with squats, deadlifts, and maybe some of those heavier weights that we've seen in the past. Is that kind of a shift that you're seeing as well? And what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think the key is that people have to get stronger. When we get untrained athletes in the gym, somebody's coming off the couch, gaining strength is transformative. The back squat is a really, it's not an easy thing to coach, but your strength will increase tremendously. The deadlift is the same thing. You can teach somebody to deadlift pretty quickly, and they're not moving big weight initially, but they will get way stronger, way faster.
I just want to interrupt for a second. And when you specifically talk about a deadlift or a squat, in the case of like a back squat, not only does the movement get stronger, but in people that are new to some of this stuff, everything usually goes up. A lot of their other lifts that you might have them do or other exercises, they might even tell you, like, I just feel stronger, right?
Oh yeah, just the ability to organize your body. To generate enough tension. And no, it's funny because you've got too much tension now, but right. The ability to create that tension is really important. So a lot of people don't have the ability to even figure out how to get tight to pick something up or to push load or to, move their kids around the house, whatever that looks like. So, teaching some basic motor patterns are really important, I think, and squat and deadlifting long-term, is that ideal? I don't know. I'm open to new metrics for that stuff, but getting people stronger, building metabolic conditioning, giving them access to better range of motion, and joint stability, all hugely important.
One thing whenever a lot of these people come onto the show, I always try to think about, instead of totally getting rid of something else, like just totally stopping back squatting, how is there a way that maybe this can be included for someone, but it doesn't end up causing them more pain than benefit in the long term. Because when it comes to fitness, everyone starts something and then they have a goal. If you start lifting in the gym and you just do barbell work, you're like, I want my squat, bench, and deadlift to get stronger. So that means more weight on the bar over time. But then maybe if you are able to squat 500, maybe there are certain things in terms of how you move that just become kind of shitty, right? So my question, like for you, what do you think would maybe be some baselines? Because let's say instead of squatting triple your body weight, it'd be maybe 1.5 times your body weight as a squat would be something that could be beneficial for your bone density and strength, but maybe it's not too, it doesn't take away too much from your movement over time, right?
Totally.
What would you think about there?
Yeah, I guess I don't have an exact answer for that question, but it depends on the starting place for somebody. You know, you get some people who come in and it's just like they can just rip weight off the floor, you know, day one. They're just strong. You know, that's what they're programmed for. You get some people, maybe they're from a yoga background or maybe they're super flexible and it's like they can't generate tension at all. So their end point is going to be very different, you know, so maybe quantifying that isn't important. Helping people understand how to progress is important. And I think one of the things that goes pretty well in a CrossFit gym is that we're trying to access all these different aspects of athleticism. We want strength, we want endurance, we want to be able to handle our body weight, you know, plyometrics, everything in between that. And so if you come to a gym and you're relatively untrained and your goal is just get a big total, you know, powerlift total or Olympic weightlifting total, you're probably going to be motivated to push in that direction way past what might be healthy or optimal for movement long term. If you're unwilling to get too strong because that's going to compromise your ability to run, there are some checks and balances built into that I think work pretty well.
And CrossFit has done a very, like, when some people in the audience maybe sometimes think of a CrossFit, and I used to think of CrossFit in this way too. I mean, you used to see a lot of maybe ridiculous ways that people would put things together, but then it would cause injury down the road because of movements being done in an irresponsible fashion. But CrossFit, if someone does it well, it does a really good job of allowing athletes to be able to lift some decent weight, be able to go out and run comfortably, be able to jump, be able to move in different ways while maintaining a strong body that has different abilities. And that's something like if you see a powerlifter or a bodybuilder, try CrossFit. We actually did this video back at the old super training gym. It was great. It was, I think Alan Thrall was here.
Real world tactical.
And
Ben
Alderman, who was the CrossFitter, and I was the bodybuilder, powerlifter of the bunch. I was the fucking worst. I think I was around 260 pounds, but we were going through a workout. Alan was the strongman guy. He was doing better than me. Ben was killing both of us, even though he wasn't as big as either of us. And I was the worst because I didn't have these other abilities, right? So CrossFitters have a very good overall way to express their body's fitness.
Yeah. And when we think about like fitness, I think it's important to try to define it. And I think that's one of the things that Glassman did early on that was really good. He was saying, what is it to be fit? How do we define it? Because if we can't define it, then how do we measure it? And if we can't measure it, how do we know if we're improving it? And I think that should still be one of the questions that we're asking when we're exploring some of these different modalities of training. You know, we should still be saying, you know, what are we trying to accomplish? You know, try to figure it out.
Yeah, we're watching some video. These guys dragging a sled. I think they had to drag a sled, jump up onto something, pull something. But you're 100% correct. You know, I think even now, like a lot of times with my own training, sometimes I don't have it defined. You know, sometimes I'm like, sometimes you're just floating out there. You're like, what am I doing? And then you might set an idea up for, oh, I'm going to do this contest or competition of some sort. I'm going to go do this run. And I think that having that groundwork down first, like what do you consider healthy? What are some of your goals? Like somebody wants to be 10% body fat, but yet they also want to maybe do some other things that don't align with that really well. You know, we see that a lot. Or somebody that wants to, somebody who wants to be really strong, but they also want to have a great amount of endurance. You can do both, like you can. But it just might slow down the progress towards some of that. So defining what some of your goals are and defining fitness and health for you, I think is massively important for people.
I agree with you 100%. I had a friend, I've been trying to get this guy, I've known him since birth. I've always tried to get him to work out. He lives on the other side of the country now, so I leave him alone. But last time we lived together, or in close proximity, trying to get him to work out, do anything, and he didn't want to do it. And so finally, like this was years later, his wife got him to try CrossFit. He was like, "Oh, dude, we went and did this workout, and like, they just try to kill my shoulders." And I was like, "Well, when you say kill my shoulders, do you mean like they were trying to help you become stronger?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's stupid." And, he had just rejected it and never went back. Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Listen, man, like you don't have to do CrossFit. There are tons of ways to be strong and healthy and fit." But I was like, I would encourage you to define that for yourself and not make excuses around it. So I was like, why don't you define what it is to be fit? I was like, how many pull-ups can you do? He was like, I don't know, couple. And I was like, is that good? Is that strong and healthy and fit for an adult man who's, 38 years old? I was like, what about running? I was like, how fast can you run? How effective are you in your pickup basketball league? You define it. Don't let me tell you what it is to be fit. You figure it out, and then figure out or go find somebody who can help you set up a program to reach those goals. And I think that if more people spent time thinking about what it is to be fit or healthy and how to get that, I think that would be a good kind of endpoint to work backwards from.
What did you notice with functional patterns that stood out to you that to make you want to try it? Because we both get trained by the same guy. We both get trained by John Mills. And so what was something that, I know you're pretty open to exercise anyway. You're pretty open to new ideas and concepts. But like what stood out to where you're like, I need to investigate this more?
Well, I'd seen it online a little bit, but it was mostly because my buddy Pasha, I think he and John used to work together, but he started doing it. And we actually started coaching CrossFit together. It was like 12 years ago. And he had a CrossFit gym, and then he got into gymnastics, and he got into kettlebell stuff, and then, he found functional patterns. And he's just one of these guys that I think he tries to find the bottom of a rabbit hole, so he'll just like dive down all in and figure it out. And so I saw him training. I was like, that's pretty intriguing. What's it all about? And so I did some sessions with him, just, had him, show me some stuff. And I was like, this is really interesting. It definitely showed me that there were some holes in my game, just the way I move and the understanding of my body. And you try that a couple of times and you're like, it's cool. What you see is what you can't see. Like you don't know, what's outside of your periphery. You
Right.
can't see it, but you see somebody, who's a really good practitioner and they show you something in a different way. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can see this now. Like I have some awareness over this, aspect of the way I move or my athleticism that's pretty interesting.
What are some of the key things? Because I've had my interpretations of it from seeing certain things on social media, right? Many of those interpretations could be potentially wrong, but what I was saying was helping people learn how to move have different types of movement going around at the same time, right? But when someone's looking at that, what are some of the key things or key fundamental things that are going on that most don't understand? Because when you do see it on social media, when you go to either Naughty's page or FP or whatever, you see a lot of this cool stuff, but you're like, it's cool, but I don't know what the fuck is actually happening here.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, a lot of the movement-based stuff, like a lot of the stuff that John was showing us where, you're doing some pendulums and there's some footwork in there, like I'm not that attracted to that. I don't enjoy doing that. I think there's a reason to do it, so I'll play along and do that. But what I found to be most compelling was the awareness of posture, and creating better posture. I've always harped on people for posture, but I didn't have all of the tools I needed to really help them change that, or even to improve my posture to the degree I wanted to. So that was really cool. And then some of the stuff that he didn't show us today, and I don't know if you can go into all that, FP stuff, if he's able to do that. But really,
some of the stuff with the cables is probably more what you dig, right?
Really slowing down movement and practicing it almost isometrically, right? It's like you practice the position, you really get that dialed in, and you can see how your body wants to move one way, but you're trying to create a better position, and it's very specific.
He has you do the movements, Nsima. He has you do these movements so slowly that, like, if there's a glitch, he makes you. He pauses and like makes you do it the right way, and it's frustrating because we all know it's harder to do it slower. It's harder to do it slower. So as soon as, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, like as soon as he lets me kind of go, then I can like I can figure out a way to go. But he doesn't want like any glitches in there, because when you do go to put force into something, the glitch that's showing up when you're moving really slow is probably still showing up when you're moving really fast. And you're probably being lazy or overcompensating in some way. And he was kind of mentioning today, I forget the wording that he kept, cages. He kept saying he kind of put things in cages, and you protect around it, and then you could still be extremely functional from there. And I think, that might be some of the stuff that happened to me. Like I got tight, and I put stuff in cages, and it's like, I can do this stuff really, really well. And then as soon as I'd go outside of that, I could do stuff, but I would obviously be very like tight and had a hard time, I guess, displaying my strength or prowess in any other areas.
Yeah. Back to the video that you guys had up there a minute ago. Are you familiar with some of CrossFit's definitions for fitness?
Give it to us.
Well, so one of them is called the Hopper model. And I don't know if you guys remember the first CrossFit Games. I don't know. It's in 2007. But they literally had a hopper, like a basket, and a bunch of movements in there. And they just pulled movements out of there. And that's how they decided, what the competition was going to be. And the idea behind that is if you have several athletes show up, and this was like open invitation. You had some really strong guys, bodybuilders, endurance guys, all showing up.
John Wellborn, a former football player.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But
he was at the first CrossFit Games. Yeah, he competed.
But yeah, I remember him doing CrossFit back in the
Offensive
day.
lineman. You got to admire that. 6'5", 300 pounds.
But it's kind of a fun contest. It's like we were talking about, it's like MMA used to be before everybody became a specialist, right? But it's fun, right? So let's say you have like, Kipchoge, who's like the greatest marathoner of, our generation. And then you have, you show up doing a little bit of running, strength background. And you have Matt Fraser shows up and you kind of pull some random tasks out. What's the task? Let's say it's going to be a ruck, right? It's going to be, 20 hours of hiking with a heavy pack on your back. Who wins? Who's the best at that? Kipchoge's got endurance, but if you put a heavy pack on him, I think he's probably neutralized pretty quickly. You can certainly carry the heaviest pack, but for how long? And so it's like, it's an interesting, conversation. So if we are trying to define fitness in a way that's going to let us improve it, that Hopper model is interesting only because, you can put in any task in there. Help me water the trees, haul around a 55-gallon barrel of water, who's good at that? I don't know. It might not be the best sprinter. It might be, but it's interesting to test it out and kind of see.
It might be the guy that's the most efficient at it or has some experience doing it, right?
Right. Yeah. But, if you want to train for that breadth of activity, and that's what we don't know about things like, GOATA or functional patterns, how does that translate into everything else? Now, if you're like, I'm just trying to get better at, standing, walking, running, throwing, well, really good protocol there in FP. Probably for martial arts, pretty good foundation. But, how do you want to, how good do you get at pull-ups? Is that important to you? Should it be important? I don't know, but that's all kind of part of the conversation.
What is the definition of fitness from CrossFit?
Well, there are a few
more specifically. I know you mentioned the Hopper model, and that's kind of like we're just going to throw down and let's figure out like what exercise someone's the best at.
Yeah, they've got a few ways of defining it. Another one they look at is if you look at, have you ever seen the whole sickness, wellness, fitness continuum?
I don't believe so.
So that one's interesting too. So if you have this arc, right, and at one end you have somebody who's sick, pathologically sick. In the middle of that, you'd have well, and then on the other end, fitness. And if you take any markers that will indicate that, right? So if you look at inflammation of the body, or if you look at blood pressure, if you look at body composition, there it is. There you go. Triglycerides, flexibility, muscle mass, all indications of somebody who's, sick, well, or fit. The idea being that if you influence your fitness, all of these other things come along with it. So if, sickness, you have very high blood pressure. Wellness is kind of like a healthy American at like 120/70. What's the typical, blood pressure of somebody who's, of an athlete? So the idea is there are a couple of different ways to define fitness. We can look at this from some different angles, but they all kind of tie together.
Yeah, and I guess you can also over fitness yourself, right? Like,
well, I've always said when I look at
to
this,
a point where it starts to really pull on stuff, or go back down from wellness. Right?
Totally, and I think that one of the things that's a real trap is when you get into competition. Because I know as an athlete, I'm sure you guys know too. Like when you are chasing an athletic goal, you are probably going to be willing to make some compromises to your health to pursue performance. you know, and if you're trying to get up to that like razor's edge of what you're able to do, what are you willing to compromise? In my 20s, I would have compromised anything. I didn't care. So
that's, you know, you bring that up and it makes me immediately like, I think of high level no-gi grapplers, right? Because someone can do jiu-jitsu and they can stay fairly safe. Actually, they can stay really safe. But when you get into the competitive aspect of it, especially when you get into competitive no-gi grappling, where the game isn't just like jiu-jitsu, but now the game is knowing how to submit somebody from the feet, and then more specifically heel hooks, the amount of videos I've seen of high-level grapplers get like people just, and at that point it's a fight. So they'll just crank it. ACLs are going like right and left, and all. It's normal for these guys just to get surgeries and be back 6 months later like, I tore my ACL, I tore my MCL. And it's like, you know, jiu-jitsu is great, but then when you take it here, oh God, it's no longer fitness anymore. It's competition.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to be careful of when we're talking about training. You know, you really have to figure out what that level is. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, my experience, you know, back squatting, deadlifting, you know, pressing, you know, and, you know, we were just saying, I was telling you that, you know, I don't really care about my strength anymore. I stay under load, so I can still, you know, I could probably max out close to, you know, where I did at, you know, my all-time best, but you're not pushing that. You're not chasing it at a certain point. You're staying strong. And if it advances, it advances. Often it does, because if you're training smart and sensibly, it will keep, you know, you'll keep getting stronger. But your goal isn't to push that as hard as possible. And I think that's a trap for a lot of people, especially people who really get into training and they get excited because they see a change in their body and they see their fitness go up, then they want more and more and more. They want to get greedy, you know, and to help people understand, like, this is a lifetime endeavor. You know, it'll probably look different to you, you know, in 5, 10, 15 years. So making sure that you know, have appropriate balance is critical. Actually, something that, I don't know if you mentioned this, but like something that a question that anybody can ask themselves is like, what am I compromising? I think that's actually a question you can ask with anything, because if you go way too deep down the bodybuilding rabbit hole and you're like, I want to get as big as possible, what are you compromising? You're probably compromising your ability to move well, to pick shit up, to even run a mile without being winded, right? If you go too deep down the powerlifting rabbit hole, what are you compromising? Different levels of, again, mobility and movement. If you go too deep down the yoga rabbit hole, what are you compromising? My ability to create stiffness in certain positions where now, like, if low touches me, I'm a fucking limp noodle, right? So it's, if you can figure, and it's individual to everybody, because some people love bodybuilding. So they don't care about the compromises on the other things, because fuck, they don't care about running or anything like that. But, you know, I can kind of feel like, for me, I want to be good at a lot of different things. So I'm being careful not to go too deep down certain rabbit holes where it doesn't take away from other stuff. And I think everybody has that different level of compromise they're going to be willing to make with anything that they do in terms of their fitness.
Yeah, you know, I was fortunate enough to learn from Louis Simmons, and like, you know, even though I did power lift at a high level, even though I did crush myself with a lot of heavy weights, and I'm a little bit stuck, I'm still standing here, you know, and I'm still able to do stuff. I'm still able to make some good conscious decisions on how I want my body to like proceed from here on out. And a lot of that has to do with, after every competition, I would always lose weight. I would always work on being healthier every single time. After every competition, I'd always start back over. I'd always start with lighter weights. It wasn't like I just perpetually tried to lift more and more and more and more. I would discontinue what I was doing. I wouldn't necessarily do the opposite of what I was doing, but I would bring in higher reps. I would do various movements, and I knew that I was turning my body into concrete. So I was like, well, let me work on some lunges. Let me work on dragging a sled forward and backwards. It wouldn't kill me to do some med ball tosses. It wouldn't kill me to do some box jumps and some various things like that, just to try to keep in some form of athleticism. And it didn't look very athletic, you know, at 300 pounds, but there was at least there was a percentage. And I think for the people that are listening and the people who have been following for a long time, like, I just want to make sure people understand that if you're going to leave something behind, just keep it behind just for a little bit, and go ahead and like bring it back in. Like if you're dealing with a lot of back pain, you might have to leave out some conventional lifting that you really love. But it's not forever. It's just until you get other things figured out, until you start to move better, until you start to feel better. Once those things happen, then you could start to reassess and say, I wonder, I don't think the deadlift's that bad of a movement. Maybe instead of like a regular deadlift, maybe I could do like a trap bar. Maybe I can look into doing more partial range and start there and start light and kind of go from there. And I think people don't have to be like disappointed about, you know, a message coming from a particular group saying like they don't want you to clean anymore. You know, they don't want you to do your cleans and your snatches and stuff like that. If those are things that you like to do, I strongly suggest that you figure out ways to stay connected to them. But again, if your shoulder is all fucked up and you know, had rotator cuff surgery recently or something like that, leave that shit behind for a little bit. But it's just for a short period of time. And you should be able to get it back. There's no reason why you can't lift weights. There's no reason why you can't bench press until the day you die, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of I mean, I call everybody an athlete. Everybody is an athlete, right? But one of the things that's really important to understand is that what we're doing is building a relationship with our body, you know, and the closer we listen, the more tools we have to listen, the better we're going to do. And so, you know, if you love back squatting, if you love deadlifting, if it's the bench press, if it's cleans, if it's snatches, if it's gymnastics, or if it's running. I mean, a lot of people, there are a lot of banged up runners out there. You need to step away from that before it becomes a real problem. Like when it starts bugging you, well, actually, you should be digging into, you know.
This guy is so smart with his training with jiu-jitsu. Like, I know that you want to go, but sometimes you're like, nah, I'm not going to, you know, and meanwhile, you have other guys, and I appreciate the how dedicated people want to be to it, how excited they get about it, but they're like, I have to go 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I got to go 7 days a week. I got to be there every single time. And that's, you know, to each their own, I guess, but slow and steady. It's boring. It's not the greatest thing, but if you're banged up and you can't go do jiu-jitsu the way that you want to do it, then I don't know if it's a good idea to go.
No, you should back off as soon as you feel it, you know, that it's not right. Or if, you know, if you're really not motivated to train on a given day, that doesn't mean you shouldn't move, but you've got to be willing to walk away from whatever your plan was, you know, in a heartbeat. And then, you know, if it is something like, you know, your shoulder's bugging you, or your knee, your hip, your ankle, whatever it is, don't do what you plan to do just because that's what's on the board for the day. You know, that's the worst plan. What you should do is start figuring out, like, okay, why does it hurt? You know, how's my soft tissue work? You know, how's my mobility? How's my range of motion? You know, how's my technique? You know, these are all things that you could do, you know, instead of what you had planned to do, that will make that activity better, right? So if you're dedicated to squatting, don't keep squatting till you can't squat anymore, because that's the worst way to get better at squatting. You know, instead, like the second you feel, you know, some limitations there, what you need to do is peel back layers of the onion and figure out what's going on. You know, once you have figured out what's going on, it's going to make you a better squatter, and it's going to make you healthier long term.
I was just going to ask, because, you know, as a very simple running question, you know, we ran that mile. You guys were all, you know, in the front pack. I was kind of more towards the middle, and then we had a pack behind us. But one thing, I was running next to John, and he was, I mean, the way that guy moves was, I don't know if you guys paid attention, but it's like his feet didn't make a sound. He just didn't make a sound, period. He wasn't, I was like, is he even breathing? But me, on the other hand, by the time we made that
he wasn't even sweaty when we were done.
Right. I was like, did he even go? Like, well, okay. But me, after we made that, like that last turn, I'm like, fuck, dude, control your breathing. Like, and I couldn't, you know, I'm just like, you know, I just don't want to quit. So I'm going to get there however I get there. So for my very simple, basic level 1 question, when it comes to running, jogging, moving, jumping on your feet in a pattern forward, how do you teach like endurance and cardio, like to build your cardio up? Because since I was a kid, I can sprint okay, and then I'm not even talking about like good mechanics or anything like that. I'm just talking about like I can get up and down the basketball court pretty good a couple times, but then after that I'm just dying. And I remember my dad telling me like, well, you should just be able to find a pace and then just like never stop. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I am dead like already. So for someone like me who just, I mean, like I said, I don't have any experience long distance running, short distance running hardly either. But like, how do you coach somebody to like just help start building up that endurance so that way they can, I don't know, man, like some of the stuff you were teaching us today, I'm like, I would love to be able to put that in practice. But by the time we get down to the end of the turf, I'm already kind of gassed. Like, you know, like I don't have that big gas tank right now. So how do I build that up?
Yeah, great question. A couple of thoughts. Number one, John wasn't sweaty because he ran so slow. Okay, so
He did. He ran like a 10:30.
all right.
I
Hopefully,
was trying to
tunes it
keep up
later.
with him too.
Yeah, no, so I think that a couple of things about getting better at running. If you want to run, like you specifically just want to get better at running, right? So you want to do a running program. I always start people off with a run walk program, and nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to do it.
Right.
You know, they get bored of the walk part and they just run through and they're like, oh, I made it like 21 minutes.
It sucks to stop.
Yeah.
You feel like defeated.
Right. But instead, you've got to like kind of stick to a plan. So what I generally tell people is start with something like this. We're going to run for 30 minutes, right? Only we're going to break that into 5-minute intervals, and we're going to run 2:30, right? And just an easy casual run for 2:30. Then you're going to walk for 2:30, you know, and do that whatever we decide fits into your program, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever. And then the next week, you can bump that up to 3 minutes of running and 2 minutes off. And then we go 3:30 and 1:30 and then, 4 and 1. And you just chip away at it until, the last week you're running for 4:30, and then you're, just walking for 30. So you're basically running for 30 minutes straight. It's just one way to approach it, but you've got to make it easy enough that you can just kind of commit to it and chip away at it. Don't do too much too soon.
And how many weeks would that like be over?
What is that? I don't know.
I'm not good at math.
Can't count that high.
Nsima's pretty good at that.
I think it's like a 6-week program, 5-week program, something like that.
Okay.
But
You'd
then,
make huge improvements in just a handful of weeks, really. Yeah.
But the key is like, if you want to get into running, make it easy enough that you can enjoy it. Don't punish yourself out there because then you'll just hate it.
Yeah, because just thinking, like when John was showing us some of these movements where it's like, I was telling him like, well, I just want to bro out sometimes. Can I do like all these movements separately and, like chase the pump kind of a thing? But when he was talking about putting it all together, and there's kind of like almost like for like a survival purpose. So that's how I'm looking at jogging. I'm just like, dude, if I can't, if the fucking earth cracks in half, like I'm not going to get from here to, I don't know, fucking Utah, I won't make it. So I'm just like, well, for like, if we are talking about survival and like the way like humans are supposed to move, I should be able to jog for a long distance, and right now I can't.
Totally. If we're writing a list of like, okay, what physical skills do we need to be competent in to be decent humans? I think running's on that list for sure.
I think a good goal for somebody who's already like halfway fit. I mean, if you're really heavy or something, and you're coming from further place back. Running for 20 minutes, I think, is running for about 20 minutes straight is a really good goal for people to have. Run for 20 minutes straight and have some sort of controlled breathing, not just nasal breathing. That's like a different level, but some sort of controlled breathing. That's probably going to take you. That would probably take you about 2 months, 3 months, but that's not really that long. I mean, to go from where you're at now to be able to run for 20 minutes, and then once you can run for 20 minutes straight, you'll actually find out. You'll be like, I actually can probably run for like an hour straight. Because once you're there, you're there.
How much conditioning do you do now?
So right now I just do steady state cardio about 3 times a week on a Stairmaster. But and my heart rate will usually be under 120. Some days I will bump it up a little bit, and then I will get above that. But for the most part, I'm getting better at controlling my breath and being comfortable on that long enough.
If you got his heart rate up 10 beats or so, he's like right there, right?
Yeah. Well, have you ever tried like CrossFit style metabolic conditioning? Any of that stuff?
Very little, but yeah, I mean, we've done it here in the gym a couple of times where we would do circuits and pushing the sled.
He's pretty good at it.
So I can. It's just not my preferred way of moving around in the gym.
So you might incorporate a little bit of that, and it does. You can put in some weight movement, some gymnastics into it. Sled pushing is great. Throwing some running intervals and that sort of thing, but. I can tell you a quick story about an athlete I just started training. She came in about 3 months ago, and she's a soccer player. Kind of that's what she's done forever. And so she ran a little bit to stay in shape for soccer, like, a couple times a week, and was doing some HIIT program. I don't know what HIIT program, but something at home. And so she had no interest in CrossFit, didn't want to try it, but her friend like just dragged her in kicking and screaming. So finally she tried it, and she was like a tough sell. Like everything was pushed back, which I like. It was a fun little challenge. So we got her going a little bit. And during this time she was training for an off-road 10K and started to develop a little bit of tendonitis in her Achilles. And I was like, and she has some, WOTA patterns for sure in her right foot especially. And so I was like, you got to stop running, back it off. I was like, you'll be fine. Races in like 5-6 weeks, you're going to be fine. Right. And so I was like, we'll modify for you in here. We'll make sure that we're not aggravating that. And so she trained for the next 6 weeks and went out and did this race. And she PR'd her 10K time by 25 seconds per mile.
Whoa.
Without doing any additional running. Now, she's not a high level runner, and that's not really what her goal is. But especially at the beginning of training, metabolic conditioning is so potent. It's super potent. So if you want to just like upgrade your metabolic capacity to the point where running's easy, if you incorporate some hard Metcons on a regular basis, that can, make a pretty profound difference.
Give us an example. We kind of did one together that one day.
Yeah, we were playing with some different stuff.
We did a triplet, right?
Yeah, we were doing a little, we're using a landmine attachment to do some clean and jerks with the landmine, get a little more rotation in it. We're doing a sled push, and then we just did a core movement. We're doing V-ups. Yep. And we just set the clock for 12 minutes. We set the rep range at something that would keep us moving, so we weren't really grinding it out. And then, we just got as many rounds as we could in.
And it's as difficult as you want to make it to be. I mean,
Totally.
if you feel like you can explode into some of those movements, well, now it's a whole different game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a mental aspect to that type of training too. You don't want to just be blasting out super high intensity metabolic conditioning all the time, but to put that in your program is definitely reasonable, because you can easily create a stimulus that's just overwhelming. It's hard. And when you go running then and you're cruising along, you're like, oh man, this hurts. You're like, actually, it doesn't hurt that bad. So you just kind of recalibrate to what it feels like to breathe hard, to be under that kind of exertion.
When you think of a triplet, which is just the 3 exercises together, what kind of comes to mind? Like, how do you organize it? Because I've done them twice with you now, and both times there was a core component, an ab component to it. How are you pairing them up? Because I tried to add an exercise or two in, and you're like, nah. And so I'm curious on your thought process as you go through that. Is it as simple as matching up like 2 easy exercises with one zinger, or like how are you thinking about it?
It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So if we're making a workout for a high-level CrossFit athlete that has a complete skill set when it comes to gymnastics, cardiovascular conditioning, and weightlifting, right, then we can make them really nasty. If you've got a person that has less, capacity in one of those areas, you have to be a little bit more careful. So some of the classic CrossFit, triplets would be like Helen. It's 3 rounds, a 400-meter run, 21 kettlebell swings, and 12 pull-ups. And
that'll fucking knock you on your ass.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
That last round, you go deep, and you finish a 7-minute workout, 7 to 10 minute workout like that, and it'll put you on your ass. It's pretty serious. That one, you're really taxed on your grip. The running is hard because you're just trying to, you can't give up time on that run. You can push it pretty hard.
So someone could look at something like that, and they could kind of take their own model, like maybe the 12 pull-ups, and maybe the run is a little far. So someone can say, I'm going to do a minute on the assault bike. I'm going to do 12 reps of a seated row. Like you can kind of like make it your own, right?
Yeah. Or we can adjust the rep range, to make it more accessible to somebody, to keep them in an appropriate time domain.
Run 200 meters, 6 reps on the pull-up, something like that.
And so if you're trying to challenge me, you might want to give me some longer sets, right? So then it's like, okay, really, how am I going to break up this set? How do I keep moving? That's going to be the challenge. For a less conditioned athlete, you might want to give them much shorter sets to just keep them moving, so that they can pick up the kettlebell and do 10 to 12 swings. They can get, maybe it's not pull-ups. Maybe we're doing like, a horizontal ring row or a jumping style pull-up, and you give them a slightly shorter rep, and it just keeps them moving so they get that high metabolic output, but they're not taxed so much by the movements that they're looking at. And
there's no break. Like once you get through the 3 movements, you just start right back over again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or if we wanted to do, if we wanted to do a running workout, but we wanted to focus on some running mechanics and some speed on our runs. Let's say we're going to stay with a 400-meter run, we could make that an interval where we did something like we could just switch around that particular triplet where we did that 400-meter run. We come in, we hit a set of pull-ups, whatever we agree would be, kind of an appropriate range that we can push straight through. And then we set the clock. In the remainder time, we're going to do max rep kettlebell swings. And then clock stops, you get designated rest. That way we can start running again. We can maintain the quality of our run if that's really what we're trying to accomplish that day.
Thinking about the quality of the run, since you have so many people that come through and maybe they're picking up some running with their workouts, and we definitely have a lot of people in the audience that are getting more interested to running since Mark's doing a lot of running. How important are the mechanics of the way that the foot strikes the ground? Because I believe when Chris Henshaw was here, actually I don't want to necessarily put words in his mouth, but I've heard individuals that were runners, like Nick Bear actually mentioned this. He doesn't quite literally care about how the foot strikes the ground. I think he actually strikes heel toe. I might be incorrect, but some people have mentioned how that's not a big deal whether you heel strike or whether you forefoot strike. But when you coach people through becoming better runners and running so it doesn't end up hurting them in the long run, how do you help them develop good running mechanics from the feet up?
Well, that's changed recently a little bit, with a lot of that GOATA stuff. I've been playing with that for the last few months, and it's made a huge difference just in my foot shape, ankle shape, and
how so?
Well, I used to have pretty flat feet, definitely
okay.
navicular bone dropped a little bit, low inside ankle bone.
Mm-hmm.
And I could control that if I'm standing here and we're talking about it, but definitely running, I watched some videos of myself and losing it. So incorporating some of their exercises has definitely helped. So I just start, before we run now, I have, the class start to incorporate some of those exercises.
Like the GOATA warm-up?
Totally.
Okay. It's really
and just working on that foot strength and the ankle strength. But I can't tell you exactly how important that is because there are a lot of really smart people, much smarter than me, that are having disagreements about it, right?
Yeah.
So it's back to that thing, I don't know, maybe everybody doesn't have to be right or wrong. There's probably a lot of variability from athlete to athlete. But what I was showing you guys today, I think finding good position when you run and maintaining fast cadence, I think that's the easiest way to keep people from hurting themselves. What jacks people up running is that slow cadence heel strike. Now I'm talking about big heel strike. If you're a little heel striker and you've got a fast turnover, and you're healthy doing that, who am I to say that that's wrong? But I can tell you that if you're really striding it out, those feet are staying close to the ground and you're just, slamming your heel into the ground, decelerating and then reaccelerating, that's a really rough way to run.
Yeah.
There's so much confusion about this sometimes, and I always have to go back and just kind of remind people that when it comes to jogging, jogging to me is like a little slower pace. Jogging is not somebody running like a 6 or 7 minute mile. To me, that's running. And I think when you're running and when you're starting to produce more force, I think that's when you have to be more careful and more conscious. I'm not saying that when you jog, you can do whatever you want, especially because people will jog so far and they'll do so many reps that it might have a similar amount of damage as producing tons of force and going about it potentially the wrong way. But jogging initially was taught to have a heel strike. That's kind of initially how it was brought up and initially how it was popularized by one of the co-founders of Nike was to heel strike and to roll forward. And so I just think that people don't know the history behind it. And if you're wearing a shoe that's appropriate, that's guarding you from that, there's potential that you don't have anything negative happening to you. However, I get a lot of questions from people. They're like, how in the hell are you running? How often are you running? And I'm like, I pretty much run every day. And they're like, how's your knees and your back? And I'm like, they're fine. Everything feels good. And I think a lot of that has to do with I started very, very slow, very slow. Maybe even doing 12, 14-minute miles, something like that. I started with walk runs. I started saying, hey, I wonder what it looks like when I run for 30 seconds straight. I started really, really slow and really comfortable. And as I've been running, I've been practicing more stuff, and I do so as well very slowly, and I try not to leave the ground too much because I don't want to jump into stuff that can potentially hurt me. So with each stride, I try to almost stay low to the ground. And I don't know a ton about running, but I know what I know from working on myself, and it's just stuff that has been feeling right for me. And I've noticed some good changes in these different practices, but I've also noticed that by default, certain things start to happen and certain things start to open up. Like my stride is starting to open up just via running, just via like me trying to run a little faster. One leg shoots back a little bit further. One arm shoots a little bit more forward. And next thing you know, like the body rotates a little bit more with each stride. The other thing that I've noticed too is like when it comes to trying to keep the feet straight, if you just pull your hip into the center of your body, your foot kind of ends up straight anyway. And if you slow down the fastest sprinters in the world, which might not be always the best place to start, but when you watch those guys run, there's a lot of internal rotation of that knee. And the knee almost crosses over the body. And so when I'm running, those are things I'm trying to be conscious of because I'm like, I think my foot will land nice and straight. I think I'll have a good toe strike if I can just lean forward and have that knee come slightly in with every step that I take.
Yeah. And that's where, doing some of those positional drills and then, running, a short run of 400 and 800 coming in, kind of running some rounds of that to really kind of feel that patterning and then ingrain it, I think could be really useful.
Is there any detriment to being too far on the balls of your feet? Because, again, going back to like my history of running, like I thought you only could heel strike. Like I didn't know that there actually was a difference. My dad would tell me, get on your toes. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, dude. But like today, I was wearing very minimalist Vivo barefoot shoes. So like if I did land on my heels, everyone would have heard it and I'd be screaming in pain, because it would have been terrible. But so what that forced me to do was literally be on my toes the entire time. Now my calves aren't used to it, so they're really tight right now and like almost started to cramp up. It was fine. But is there the opposite where it's like, okay, heel striking's pretty bad, but if you're only on your toes, is that equally as bad?
Probably, but I don't think a lot of people default to that. And I think what you'd feel if you were too on your toes, I think you'd feel real bouncy when you ran. You wouldn't feel like you were propelling yourself forward at all. You'd just be kind of hopping in place.
That sounds that's very accurate because like when I would start again trying to like, dude, I got to catch up, like, oh shit, I am completely upright. Let me lean forward, which is also new and awkward for me. So trying to combine it all into one was actually pretty difficult for me.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah. And, Mark, as a counterpoint to that, I would worry a little bit about, I worry about people getting into jogging, and just going out and jogging. Because you're right, if you're keeping it that slow, are you going to hurt yourself initially? Probably not. But are you going to develop, you've done a lot of, you're talking to some of the best, people in the country, like working with you about, how to improve your running mechanics. Most people don't have that kind of access, or it wouldn't even occur to them that people coach running. That's always surprising to me too. But what will happen for a lot of people is they will develop that heel strike. And then, as you know, with running, you just get like doing anything, you get better at it. So as they progress as an athlete, as they get more capacity, then they're still running like they're jogging. They're still doing that shuffle pace and slowly too, right? They haven't increased their cadence at all because they're not doing any speed work, but they get faster and faster and faster. And all of a sudden you get these people, I see them run down the sidewalk all the time. I'm like, that lady looks like she's been out there running for like 15 miles. And if I ran like that for like that far, my knee would just be done, but they just pound away, until they can't anymore.
I see the same thing when I'm running. I see it. I'm like, man, that person's probably been running way longer than I've been running. And I think one of the issues sometimes is that some people are probably not really making much progress, and they're not even that interested in making much progress. And so therefore they kind of just sit in this rut of doing the kind of same thing, but they continually land on that foot with the ankle in low, or they continue to have pressure on that knee or their back or their neck or whatever it might be from running. And then they go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, it's a continuous use or overuse injury.
Yeah.
We hear that a lot, but it's like, how are other people able to run, twice the amount of miles I've put on my body, and they feel fine, right?
Yeah, some people are just built for it, But I think that this kind of goes back to our larger discussion about fitness. Why are people running? Are people picking up running because they're like, yeah, it's a basic human skill that we should all be proficient at? No. Why do they really want to run? Most people it's because they want to be skinny, or less fat. And I think that's where, you know, a big part of your messaging is really important to people, is telling them, you know, how to do that, you know, and being, you know, certainly looking at nutrition first, but being open to a lot of aspects of fitness, because I get people all the time who are like, hey, I signed up for a half marathon. Will you help me train for it? I'm like, why? Why'd you do that? And they're like, well, because, you know, I really, you know, I thought it would be a good goal. And I was like, okay, cool. Tell me how much you're running right now. And they're like, well, I'm not. And I'm like, why would you sign up for a marathon then? You know, I'm like, and listen, if that's your goal, I'll help you get ready for it. But what I like to help people, like the people I want to help train for a half marathon, are people who are like, man, I got into running and I just love it. You know, I do it like every day. If I don't run, it's like my morning coffee. It's just like, I love it. I think it would be really cool to kind of test what I can do over X distance, whether it's a half marathon or a marathon, whatever. I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's dial in your training, really see what you can do. That's an exciting person to work with. But I think if people really boiled it down, like, why are they getting into running? It's because they want to be healthier, right? And one of those metrics that we're talking about, you know, body fat percentage, you know, it's a real problem for a lot of people. So, you know, they want to get into that. And I'm like, well, you're already carrying a little bit of extra weight. You know, you're not that strong. Like, this is kind of a recipe for disaster. You know,
so you'll walk it back with people and say, hey, maybe I can encourage you to do this instead.
Well, I'm like, yeah, well, let's just join my gym,
right,
you know.
Right.
But no, yeah, it's like, yeah, I'll help you train to run if you want, but let's look at this kind of holistically, and let's definitely work on nutrition, because that's, you know, the largest driver of your body fat percentage. You
know,
you run all the miles in the world, doesn't matter.
When you're mentioning the jogging thing, people can jog without heel striking. I think that's one thing that people can, like, they can try to be aware of, that if you're going super slow, you can still go super slow and strike on the forefoot. Like, you don't have to go super slow and the heel strike your way through. Obviously, walking, you can't. But like, if you were to jog and jog slow, that's what I was doing initially. Like, I was just trying to stay on that forefoot really fucking slow and slowly build from there. You know, so it's just something that you can be aware of, so that you don't develop, okay, I won't say bad, but you won't develop, I guess, the non-ideal habit of heel striking through your run.
Yeah.
And it's also protects your body. Like for me, my back, I don't know if Mark had told you about mine, but like, I've been trying to just go easier on my back, trying to repair things. It's been kind of it's been bugging me for a long time now. But when I'm on my toes, like, on the balls of my feet, and I'm kind of being real, it's like I have my own like springs in there, and it catches me every time. So even though I'm going up and down, my body feels like it's actually kind of almost staying, you know, on the same level, because I'm just catching myself every time. And without that, I wouldn't be able to do anything unless I was on the balls of my feet.
Totally. And those barefoot shoes, they'll really help with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So they're great. The thing you can't do with those barefoot shoes, if you're not already using them for running a lot, you can't just ramp up your mileage really fast. So something you might be interested in, if you're doing that steady state cardio, instead of just staying on the stair climber, it might be interesting to kind of like do the stair climber, you know, do some air bike, but then throw in like a 400 or an 800 or even a mile, right? So you can incorporate some mileage in there, but you can stay with that steady state if that's part of your program that's really working for you.
I like that idea.
For someone who, like, let's, on the running side of things, because, you know, he has a stair climber at home, right? Would there be an ideal, like, treadmill that would be good if you were a runner? Because, I mean, obviously, if you can go outside, cool. But if someone wants to do something in their garage, typically just a normal treadmill changes the gait pattern, right?
Yeah, I don't know too much about that, but you know, you've had some experience with one of those curved treadmills. You know, it's like the Woodway was, I think, the original curved treadmill.
Yeah. Right.
And I think the idea behind those is that you're using your body weight and your gait mechanics to generate speed. So I think that's probably a better option than a motorized treadmill. Because they feel different. It's almost like you can't help but slap your feet. It's, you know, I've always hated running on a treadmill.
Same.
I would way rather go outside and run in the snow or the rain than I'd get on a treadmill. I could never do it.
I just think it feels quite different, you know, being on a treadmill. But like, if that's the running you can get in, again, I think you always have to kind of go back to like, why are you doing it? You know, if you're doing it to be fast outside, then maybe you should work on spending some more time outside, or just spend time outside where appropriate. The other thing I think with a treadmill is that, you know, people, they get used to, like, especially like kind of, there's a lot of shitty treadmills, you know, that people will go and run on, and they're trying to have their like mile time apply outside. And it's like, that belt is just running underneath you as you're jumping. It's quite different than you actually propelling yourself through space. And so, again, if you're trying to run to lose weight, which that's what a lot of people are doing, maybe that's not the best place to start. If you like to run, then by all means figure out a way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody, if that's what they have access to is either a treadmill or, they want to go outside, but they don't love running,
right.
I would rather walk up the treadmill on an incline or go outside, go to your neighborhood, find a hill, and do some hill repeats on that at a hard walk, even throw on a backpack or something. Like, you can get all the fitness you need without actually running if running isn't actually part of your goal.
Power Project family, how's it going? Now, we partnered with an amazing brand, Bubs Naturals. We actually have some of the products on the table. Their MCT oil powder, their collagen protein, and this their apple cider vinegar gummies. Okay. One thing I want to let you guys know real quick is that the Bubs products, number one, they mix super well. So I've had different MCT oils and I've talked to people who've used MCT oil and mixed into their coffee, and it doesn't mix well. Well, their MCT oil is amazing on coffee in the morning just on its own, but their collagen protein, and collagen is great for joint health, hair, skin, nails, all that stuff, that also mixes just so well into coffee and everything. That's one of the crazy things. But secondly, these freaking apple cider vinegar gummies, I don't ever supplement apple cider vinegar, but they put them in gummies, which is great. 2 per serving. We have literally eaten one of these full things. Andrew and I have split this. And Mark has to be so careful. Like, we give him 2 and we take it away because it tastes so good, but it's actually really good for you. So Andrew, tell them how to get it.
Yes, guys, seriously, have just the recommended dosage. Just have 2 of those gummies. Don't have 2 full bottles the way we do. Head over to bubsnaturals.com and at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject to save 20% off your entire order. And what's really cool about Bubs Naturals is they actually donate 10% of all their profits to various charities, starting with the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. Again, bubsnaturals.com, promo code PowerProject to save 20% off. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes.
You mentioned to me 3 different ways of running that can really help people, and you gave me a book today about backing off how fast you're running to run way faster. What are some things you've learned and seen with some of that?
Well, we were talking today about just finding posture when you run. It's really easy to get fatigued when you're out there running, and the first thing that you'll lose is your posture, right? You'll start to slouch a little bit. You'll get rounded out in your upper back. You'll get that kyphosis. You'll maybe start to hunch over a little bit. And so really remembering to stay tall is important. It's important for breathing, and it's important for the mechanics of running. The second thing I try to help people figure out is kind of using gravity. Get the chest in front of your hips, fall forward a little bit, let gravity be your friend there. And the third thing we're talking about is just cadence, the number of foot strikes you're taking every minute. And increasing that. I haven't seen anybody run too fast, right? So you don't need it. We were playing with a metronome today just to kind of give you a bearing on where you are, but just always reminding yourself to step a little bit quicker will help ensure good running mechanics. The book I gave you today is really just about how to build a running program. And this particular program, I'm sure there are thousands of great ones out there, but this one just encourages 3 key runs every week. And those key runs are endurance, tempo work, and speed work. And each one of those is trying to influence a different aspect of your fitness. The endurance, we're trying to stay zone 2. We're just trying to build your base, just your cardiovascular efficiency. When you're working tempo, we're really trying to influence your lactic threshold. And then the speed work is really about developing your VO2 max, your output. And I think that running mechanics improve at high speed too. So, pushing that pace will help translate to more efficiency at lower speed. But the idea is that we're not just out there getting junk miles. And I think all exercise is good. So I never encourage or discourage someone from running because they're not on a program or doing any exercise because it's not a structured program. Sometimes feeling it out is the best way to go. But understanding a little bit of structure can make a huge difference.
What's that book called? Because I don't think we got the name of the book.
It's called Run Less, Run Faster.
Run Less, Run Faster.
A hard concept for people to grab a hold to is to basically be able to do nasal breathing while you're running, or to be able to have just be very calm while you're running, right? Be in that zone 2 cardio ratio. Is that something that you have practiced much? I know you said you have a background with cycling, right?
Yeah, I in my 20s, I did a lot of bike racing. I was pretty serious about, trying to compete for about 5 years. And then I did another 3 years of triathlon reasonably, with, some pretty dedicated, focus. And so, yeah, there's a lot of base building that goes into that. I think on the bicycle, I put in at least a couple of 10,000 mile years. It's a lot of time, it's like, 15 to 20 hours a week of riding, and so we were on a team, we had a collection of guys that were kind of at the same level coming up through the ranks. And
was the majority of that done at like 70, 80%, or was it a little higher up?
Conversational. Yeah. So you're zone 2, zone 3 most of the time, and then bouts of intensity.
So I'm curious about that. How has your breathing over the years, and how do you breathe now when you run? What do you try to focus on? And then secondly, we were talking about how you got into like strengthening your feet and changing some of that. I'm also curious how that's influenced your movement, your training, and maybe what type of improvements you've seen there. So first part, breathing and its influence, and secondly, your feet and its influence. So
I hate breath work. I hate it. I've actually reading about it right now. It was funny that John was talking about that today a little bit. But I've got a book in my truck. I was reading it before you guys got here this morning. And I've always found breath work to be really tedious. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it. So
when you say breath work, what kind of, what do you mean?
Well, focused breathing, whether you're doing like box breathing or some tempo breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, any type of breathing drill where you're just breathing really just pisses me off. I hate it.
Okay.
I find it tedious.
Just to be still and to be sitting there with your own thoughts and trying to thinking about your breathing, right?
Yeah.
Makes you antsy.
Yeah, a little antsy. You just get bored, right? I'd rather go run and be like, okay, I'm just breathing. Sometimes though, I do notice like some breathing issues. I don't think my nose works as well as it should. So sometimes I feel like at higher intensities, like the nose just kind of like becomes a bit useless. So there's probably some work I could do there to improve. But
okay.
So not a lot of breath work.
Gotcha.
I try not to think about it.
Yeah. And then how about like your feet? What have you been noticing? Because you said you've been digging into strengthening your feet and some of the GOATA stuff too, and how like that falls in line. Have you noticed it's changed anything in terms of the way you move, the way you run, the way you lift? Yeah,
for sure. Mostly in the way I walk. That's where I feel it the most. It's just walking around feels different, having worked on the lower legs. And some of the stuff I've done with John, the mechanics, find a couple dead spots in my gait that he's helped me really kind of cue into. But how I kind of move around feels different. And it's not like a really conscious thing. It's not like you're thinking about, it's not like you're pushing the sled GOATA style, right? Yeah. You're working on that pivot and really finding, the corners. It's just more ease of movement in that way. I haven't been running much actually, so I'll be interested to see how it translates to running.
Yeah.
When you're walking, you're saying you're moving easier, but is there any concentration on trying to keep the feet straight, or when you stand or anything like that, you're just kind of...
Well, when I stand, because, I'm standing all the time, I'm in the gym a lot of time and doing a lot of coaching. And so it's really easy to kind of play with foot position there. It's kind of cheating. When you work in fitness and you're around it all the time, because, you make this movement look easy. Well, you've demoed it, 1,000 times that day, So when I run a warm up, I'm doing at least part of that warm up several times every day, right? So it's like, if I want to start working on my feet, I just start coaching it and my feet get better. So it is kind of cheating, but definitely just being able to find the outside of the edge of the foot and the high ankle bone, inside ankle bone, that's become much easier. I feel like, before a few months ago, I wasn't aware of that, or at least I couldn't feel how to correct it. And now it's kind of doing it itself because of some of these drills.
Yeah.
That stuff makes my calves go on fire. That's for sure.
Yeah. My peroneal's on the outside of my leg. Just crazy. But it's interesting. I used to roll my ankle a lot. Every time we were hiking, as soon as I got fatigued, I would just kind of like, just pronate my foot or supinate my foot and just kind of fall to the outside, just on something unstable. And the first time I did some of those drills where you're really kind of like holding it to failure, that's the exact spot that lets go when I'm out there hiking and roll my ankle. So since I've been doing that, haven't noticed as much of a problem there. So
in training some of this stuff and incorporating it on your own, has it changed some of your interpretations of strength, and has it changed the way that you're working with people at your gym?
Yeah, definitely. What I want to do is develop, what I see a lot are people that come in fairly deconditioned. And they see radical change in 6 months to 12 months.
Yeah.
And at that point, now they have some capacity, they have some strength. Some people like have had a profound experience. They've gotten off medication or lost a lot of weight or whatever their goals are.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, like it's time to start peeling back some layers of the onion. It's like, okay, cool. So we got you like a lot closer to what your goal is. Now, my goal is to help you be able to move well for the rest of your life, to be healthy, to keep going. And so we need to start to address some of this dysfunction that you've had. It's like you were dysfunctional before you came in, so now we have to start working on that stuff. So I think there will be some good ways to we do thorough warm-ups every day and cool down stretching. So there's a real opportunity to incorporate some of this stuff that will really change people's movement patterns.
What are some of what are some things? I think a lot of people like applicable things. So for you and the way you've worked with people you've worked with, because some GOATA stuff, FP stuff, you've worked with a lot of different things. What are some things that you have people work in just for some general good movement?
Well, I think that's just about everything. Understanding spinal position is a big one.
Okay.
So just understanding good posture. I'm on people about posture all the time.
Okay.
So just understanding what standing up straight is. Understanding I catch people hanging on their front chain all the time. Like how you doing it today, but I didn't call you out.
Okay, so let's talk about that real quick. Hanging out on the front chain, what exactly does that look like?
Your hips are in front of your chest, right? And what it feels like is it's not an active posture, it's a passive posture. So if you just if you're standing tall and you just relax, what happens? Those hips shoot forward, we probably get a little kyphotic. And the question is, if we're standing in that posture, through a lot of our life, what kind of, negative effects does that have? And so getting people to assume better posture most of the time and move with that posture is key. Part of that is deadlifting, or squatting. If you can't find a neutral spinal position, if you're trying to squat, you don't have decent spine mechanics or the ability to brace your spine, you're not going to progress very far. I think that there's a lot of translation in this stuff too. I've been following Kelly Starrett since 2008 or 9. I think I found him, and probably contributes to the longevity I've experienced so far, but really getting into soft tissue work, on a regular basis is huge. And, he's been talking about foot mechanics for a long time, and we've been teaching this squatting. We're, creating a high inside ankle bone when we squat. Even though I could do that squatting really effectively, I didn't really see that translate into walking and running very well. Once I started incorporating some drills specifically for that, I noticed it impacted my squat immediately. Much easier to find that position squatting. Even playing with the hip circle, taking it from your knees down to your ankles for a warm-up, can make a big difference there. So just kind of thinking about rooting through the foot, a little bit differently has changed, squatting and deadlifting to an extent.
So real quick on the changing the way people stand thing, right? The changing the posture. What are some how do you cue people how to do that? Like what, because you mentioned, hips forward. So something like that is not ideal. So then what should people be thinking about when they do stand around so that their posture is correct?
Yeah, I think that the first thing that people should do is just, if you can kind of put them in a mirror sideways and have them look at themselves. But taking those hips behind the ribs is key. And then if you're a little kyphotic, right? So if you're standing there, your hips are forward and you're kyphotic, take the hips back, and then can you extend through your chest? And what you should feel is your thoracics, really kind of lighting up when you do that. And so just trying to find people in neutral, and a lot of people stand like that. They're like, I feel so goofy. I'm like, well, let me take a before and after. Let me take you a side profile of how you normally stand. And I show, we take that, and then I show them how I want them to stand. And we take that. They're like, I feel so weird. And they look at it. They're like, oh yeah, that doesn't look weird. That actually looks a lot better. But I think it just goes to show how habituated we get to, all the activities of life that bring us into this kyphotic shape.
Yeah, you can tell if it feels really good to get into some of these shapes that you're talking about. It's probably because you hang out there a lot. I can kind of feel that if I kind of put my hips forward a little bit and just let my ankle go out, then it feels pretty good because that's the way I stand often.
Yeah. Yeah, we just get fatigued, right? And we kind of dump into that position.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to work anymore.
Yeah, you kind of hang out there. The thing you mentioned about some of the myofascial release, that's been transformative for me, and I think for all of us. I think we've all been rubbing our butts and rubbing the bars and med balls and whatever else we got in the gym, kind of just all over the place, and that's helped a lot. Has that helped you a lot?
Yeah, for sure. I hurt my back it wasn't a major injury, but that was probably in 2008. And I was training a lot. I was still doing triathlon. I think I was doing CrossFit a ton. I just found it. So, of course, I was way overly gung-ho about it. And training a ton, I went from that to like sitting for a lot, right? It just, took a job and started sitting a ton. And one day I went to sit down. I was like, oh my God, my back's killing me. I was like, is this back pain? This is crazy. And I actually found an ART practitioner. I was in Phoenix, Arizona at the time, and he helped me unlock it and felt way better almost instantly. And then I kind of stumbled around, found Kelly Starrett, and he was doing his whole mobility project at the time. He was trying to put out a free video a day for a year, which turned into like 2 years or something. But so I just started following along with that, and I really learned a lot. And it was kind of like that was the first time I felt like somebody gave me the tools I needed to work on my own body. And so I never had another issue with it. It just became part of something I did. And I had a lot of dysfunction and injury from years of bike racing, a lot of bike crashes, and torn meniscus in my right knee. I think I have maybe some labral issue in my right hip, subluxated my left shoulder in a crash and had a torn labrum there. And so just nothing major and catastrophic, but things that needed a lot of work on a regular basis to kind of unwind.
Were you super light when you were doing that? Because I know sometimes the guys on the bikes, they lose a lot of weight to be faster, right?
Yeah, I was about at 170.
And what are you now?
About 200.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's a big fucking difference.
Damn.
Yeah.
What about shoes? Where should somebody start when it comes to jogging in their shoes?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. There are a lot of opinions about that. If you go to a running store, they're gonna kind of size you up and look at the way you run and try to give you something to correct that. I would encourage anyone to find a running coach or even a strength coach that is reasonably versed in this stuff and have a look at the way they run, and don't just start running, but kind of approach this from a more holistic fashion. Like maybe we do need to be doing some soft tissue work if you don't move very well, or if you're super stiff, or if you sit for a job. Don't just like buy shoes and start running. I'm not saying don't buy shoes and start running. I'm just saying do other stuff too.
You mentioned something in the gym, which is and you kind of alluded to here, like your job, you're standing a lot of the time. So a lot of things you do are perfectly natural, but I'm wondering, since you have so many types of people with different types of jobs that come into the gym, what do you suggest that they try to implement into their daily life, just whether they're at work, whether they're at home, to maintain a general level of like good movement and health? Because like if the only time that you work on the way you move and work on your body is in the gym, then there's a lot of dysfunction outside of that, if you're sitting literally for 8 hours of your day. So what do you suggest to people?
Soft tissue work.
Soft tissue work?
You gotta start doing it.
Like what?
Well, get a foam roller to start out if it's super painful, and just start to get in there a little bit. Just, rest on it, kind of explore with it. Just pick a couple of body parts and spend 10 minutes just on those body parts. Yeah. Really getting in there, and then gradually get more specific with it. Depending on who they are and how they're moving, I recommend some different things. A lot of people, because they're always in that flexed hip position, those hip flexors are a real problem for them. Everybody's tight in their spine. Their T-spine needs to be unlocked. Something that's a little bit overlooked for people who do a lot of sitting is kind of working on your pec and your core. If you're not rolling those things out, they're all tied together. So you can open your hip better, but if you're still stuck in that crunch position all the time trying to extend that thoracic spine isn't going to get you anywhere if you're completely locked down on the front side. And then, moving more. For a lot of people, have you ever tried a wall squat where you're standing with your face against the wall, like hands overhead or against the wall, right, to keep you in that vertical position? For a lot of people really tight, I'm like, dude, this is a really easy way. Like, you've got a wall at home. 10 really slow reps is brutal, but it'll help teach you those positions. So if you're at work, get up, every half an hour and do some wall squats, or find a little runner's lunge, or like just move more.
Just stand close to the wall and pop some squats.
Yep. Yeah, try to maintain all the aspects of a squat that we pay attention to do. Foot position, knee position, hip activation, and then work on getting that torso upright, without hyperextending the lumbar spine. It's
Stretching?
Tough to do. Yeah, I mean,
I mess around with stretching?
I stretch mostly dynamically to get ready for workouts. I don't do a lot of, I've got pretty good range of motion, so I don't do a lot of stretching post-exercise to cool down or to finish. I think that's beneficial for some people if they're really locked up. But definitely I like to explore kind of full range of motion before I start exercising. So, just dynamically moving through your end range of motion specific to the movements you're going to be doing that day is worthwhile.
Yeah, it seems like it seems like stretching can be more effective. Like if someone has something that's really tight, if they're doing some of the myofascial release along with the stretching and along with finding range of motion as well. So like doing the squats that you were mentioning, rolling out the area that's troubled, and then also working on strengthening the area as well.
Yeah,
you got to hit it from kind of all angles.
Totally.
We were talking earlier about what you compromise as far as your fitness is concerned. Then you also mentioned what some people learn the hard way through injury or through they go so deep down the rabbit hole that they need to dig themselves out, right? Was there anything that you kind of had to learn the hard way and changed, like forcefully changed the way that you look at your fitness, or did you just constantly kind of just adjust and change and there was nothing that really made you switch?
Yeah, I mean, an example, I was going to mention this earlier, but I was running when I first started triathlon about 2 years. I still had about a year to go in it, but I developed some IT band syndrome, which is just like, it feels like somebody stabbed me with a knife in the side of the knee. It's really brutal. And at that time, I didn't know much about, running mechanics, but I stumbled on that book, Born to Run, I was telling you about. And he was, advocating for, McDougall's a really colorful writer, so it's a fun read, but it was kind of illustrating barefoot running and the benefits of it. And so I just tried it out. So I bought a pair of, I think 5 Fingers for my first barefoot shoes. And, of course I did what you shouldn't do. And day one, I went out for a 5-mile run. I was like, hey, I can run again. It doesn't actually hurt to run on my, on the balls of my feet. So, but that kind of got me into really try to, learn about running. And kind of the next methodology I learned was pose running, which CrossFit used to embrace. I'm not sure if they still do. But that's, is definitely, the concept of falling forward. It's going to be a midfoot strike. So you're getting out of your heels. And from there, I never had any other issues. And kind of, still play with barefoot shoes to an extent. But, it wasn't like an exclusive thing that I used. It was just a tool to help me get out of pain and to figure out some mechanics.
And we did, when we mentioned cadence running and what we did today with the metronome, I don't know if we talked about exactly why that can be beneficial and important. Like we mentioned it, but why would somebody want to download the Cadence app or one of those apps and think about the cadence at which they run?
Well, I think that's kind of like twofold. Number one is, kind of like the GOATA system. Like those guys are looking at, the way the best athletes move. If you pull up, a good runner, even a marathon runner, watch how fast their legs are cycling, right? So mechanically, I can't tell you exactly what happens at a given cadence, but what I can tell you is that nobody who runs well is running with a slow cadence. What I do know is that when we slow it down, when you're not running fast, you are more likely to land heavy. And so, whether or not you're heel striking, there's a lot of time in the air between your steps. You want to kind of minimize that up and down and maximize forward momentum.
That makes a lot of sense. It just made me think of like somebody jumping up onto like a box, and somebody, you would think the more explosive person would make more noise landing, but they don't.
Right.
They're able to receive their own energy as they land on the box. And even as they come back down, they'll be much lighter, or at least lighter sounding, right?
Yeah. Right.
So one thing I'd see happening here is if somebody tries to increase their cadence too quickly, there's probably going to be some problems there. So how can people, if they're working with, the app or whatever, how do they know when they can safely increase their cadence and still, I guess, have the benefit of the run?
Well, I think that's kind of like anything. So we started out with, I think we started out with 160 beats per minute. We were just doing those like, drills inside.
Yeah.
And I just gradually ramped up the cadence, and so you can kind of play with that. So if you were going to run with a metronome and you just wanted to see like how fast am I actually foot striking, just kind of match it up and be like, okay, that's about where I feel like I am. Bump that metronome up a couple of stops, and then try to match that. And you might get to a point where you can't keep up, and that's okay. That's just kind of what you should be pushing for. And then if you just kind of play with increasing that over time, getting all the way up to like 180 steps per minute, you're probably going to be gaining some efficiency there.
CrossFit Games are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming up, right? They're like just maybe like a week or two away or something like that, right? Do you still follow it quite a bit? Or are you still like way into it? I know you still have a CrossFit gym, but are you as excited about it as you've been in the past?
Well, we do like to gamble a little bit in the gym, so we've contrived a fantasy CrossFit Games kind of.
Oh, awesome! Who you got?
Well, we actually haven't.
Oh, you haven't officially done it yet.
No, I can't give it away. Got to release the podcast after it's over. Although I never win these things, but that makes it more fun because you have a dog in the fight. I think that with the CrossFit Games, it's kind of, for me, it's a spectacle, and I love to see what's happening in the sport. What these athletes can do, I think it's bonkers. Like, they are freaks. So it's super fun to see some of the young people coming up. It'll be fun to see if Mal O'Brien can push Tia Toomey a little bit. She's been so dominant for a few years. So yeah, I pay attention to it. I watch it. But I think the CrossFit Games are always fun compared to, any other CrossFit competition, because it's really what CrossFit's supposed to be about. These guys are getting thrown at, well, probably not that volume in like a 4-day stretch, but, it does demonstrate the capacity these guys have developed. But, they're going to be, expected to swim or paddle or get on a bike or do something they're probably not used to training for. They are going to be expected to do something heavy, obstacle courses, different events. Those are the ones that are really kind of fun to see.
If they're asked to do a lot of different things, how are the same people winning multiple times? Have you figured that one out?
Man,
it's interesting, right?
Yeah. It would be... I think there will be some interesting conversations down the road, with Tia Toomey and Matt Frazier, really about what their training, look like and how they trained out weaknesses. Because it is pretty shocking, how well they did with that. Those guys were able to like develop so much strength and so much endurance,
Right.
And even just the mental aspect to be able to compete at that level.
Maybe they're just fucking better than everybody.
Honestly,
you know what I mean?
There's an aspect of they're
they're training hard, obviously. I'm sure a lot of people are training hard, but then there's just a lot of other things that line up. Your history too. I mean, Matt Frazier was a very, very good Olympic lifter. Yeah, he's very strong.
Tia Toomey as well.
Right. I think she maybe competed at like the Olympic level, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's got to make a big. And something I noticed from Rich Froning and Matt Frazier was they can both squat really well. Like, I'm not thinking about like the weight that they squat. They both are tremendously strong as well, but just the way that they squat so efficiently.
Yeah.
And if you think about CrossFit, there's how many movements have some sort of squat component. Like, there's just a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to break CrossFit down, then you would find probably a lot of similar movements, if you really thought about it, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting question. Are they, is one of the reasons they were so good because they had good squat mechanics and there's a lot of squatting in the CrossFit Games? Or is there translation from the squat into other things or Olympic lifting into other things? I mean, Tia and Matt were both, Olympic lifters before CrossFitters. Is there a translation there? I don't know. And
Matt Frazier has like a hell of a mindset too.
Yeah, the guy's a savage.
Yeah, he's just like, if you signed up and I signed up, you're done. Like, you lost. Congratulations, you're not getting first.
Who did you say would be pushing Tia?
There's a woman named Mal O'Brien. I think she's 18 now, but she's actually training with Frazier.
Shit.
Yeah, so he's coaching her. And
she was brought up before. Yep.
So young, but so strong. And it always shocks me to see a young athlete that's that well-rounded. But it looks, after the last competition, like she is really kind of rounded out her skill set. Probably working with Matt is, good for that.
Right.
But
is there something that you would like to see CrossFit do differently? Or do you kind of...
CrossFit Games or CrossFit in general?
Yeah, CrossFit Games, I guess.
So I've always thought it would be really cool to have some more standardized metrics in this. And what I mean by that is, like, I would love to see them run just a straight 1 mile race on the track, or pick your distance. Or if you're going to make them do a triathlon, which they've done a bunch of times, like make them do a relatively flat sprint distance or Olympic distance triathlon, or some strongman stuff that's kind of standardized, or, you know, just give them like, you know.
I see, something that the public can compare something to.
Right. Like, how good are these guys actually? I mean, we know they're really good and really, really good for CrossFitters, but what does that really look like? I mean, you know, what about the combine test, max rep bench at, 225, right? So that'd be kind of interesting.
If they did a mile, I mean, in CrossFit, and they did it for the next 5 years, you'd probably see some people break a 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Jesus Christ.
Totally.
You probably would, right? I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. And I don't even mind having them not know what it's going to be, but just know that there's going to be a standard test so we can see, okay, these guys in this really brutal weekend of competition just got this test thrown at them. What were they able to accomplish? Like, you know, like, cool. If it's coming up in the combine, you know you're going to have to run the 40 or you're going to have to do the bench or, you know, the other drills, but these guys didn't know it was coming, and look what they were still able to do. So I just think that would be a really interesting test that would kind of give us, looking outside, like some real perspective on how good these athletes are.
Is there something missing from CrossFit at the moment that you miss? Because like I know when I talk to people about CrossFit, they get so excited about the way it felt when they first got into it. Did something maybe go awry in the popularity of CrossFit, or is it missing some of that original connection to the things that you fell in love with?
No, I think those components are still there. You know, I think, you know, what you get from a CrossFit gym is usually a pretty competent coach and a pretty well thought out program. And you get a pretty fun group of people to train with. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that just keeps people going. It's super fun. You know, the overall stimulus is pretty low. I mean, people think about CrossFit as crazy, but like, you know, you do like a 12-minute Metcon and some skill work, like one heavy strength set and, you know, a 12-minute Metcon. Like the volume isn't that
easy
extreme.
to sit here and say that, but if you're in the middle of one of those.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. I'm practicing it for a while now, right? So it feels kind of normal. But I think those are the things that are really special about CrossFit. I do think that as coaches, we need to, as this type of information is available, expand our skill sets to keep people healthy and keep them progressing in the direction they want to go. You know, and that's really why I'm diving in. You know, I love to learn about this stuff, and you know, I love to be a white belt too. I love going and trying something I've never tried before and being terrible at it, because that's usually, you know, just kind of you want to itch that or scratch that itch, you know? It's just like, I'm not good at this. How do I get better?
Right.
I don't know if we mentioned it, but like, what are some pretty cool concepts that you learned from GOATA? As you've been digging through that stuff, you're like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. So what have you been noticing? Like, oh, this can apply really well to generally everybody that I work with.
Well, I think the idea of really cornering the hips and finding that high inside ankle bone is it's something you have to work for when you're initially doing it, you know, and it's hard, and it really wakes up your posterior chain. You know, you can find your glutes in a really different way. And I think that's important. You know, a lot of people are really disconnected from their glutes, even when they like squat, deadlift, you know, some people can't find their glutes when they do that. So I've personally found that, you know, you put people through some, you know, some GOATA drills and their glutes are awake. They're ready to go. You know, I mean, we're talking about, you know, Brad Contreras, you know, some of his, you know, glute activations. I don't know. I've done some hip thrusts and that sort of thing, some frog, you know, pulses or whatever. And it doesn't really wake them up like cornering the hips do, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, getting in some of those positions, those bows and corners, I think that's what's made the most sense for me personally. And it's something I've been working on, and it still hasn't like fully transferred over into like the makeup of the way that I move, but it's creeping in there. It's creeping in there. What I've noticed is that my default position, if I'm just kind of banged up from a previous day, or like we were so excited at the 49ers thing yesterday that we just kept fucking running around, and like they had this ramp that was outside, and they're like, yeah, we don't really use this anymore. Whoever built it way too steep, but it was a ramp that had turf on it, and we just kept running up it.
It was the most fun thing that we did there the whole time.
It was amazing.
It was so much fun.
It was kind of dangerous to come back down, because like you didn't know if you're gonna fall and shit, but like we did a lot of stuff yesterday, and there's a lot of new machines. They had the air pneumatic press Kaiser machines, and I did like a leg extension thing where like I pushed the legs out, and then I just like loaded it with like fucking 800 pounds or whatever. Not 800 pounds, but 800 pounds of air pressure. It's different than 800 pounds of weight. And so I'm just like trying to hold it.
And it felt so good though.
I'm trying to do this isometric contraction, and I'm seeing like that my left leg or whatever leg was weaker than the other. And we did a bunch of stuff like that, and we were super excited. So when I woke up this morning, I'm walking around, the right foot's ducked out, and I'm kind of like a little, fucking rocking back and forth. And then, moments later, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. But I'm excited to see if I can. I know that I'll always wake up after a day of hard work, of feeling some of that work, and I like that. But I have noticed that I continually feel better and better and better. And it's been interesting to work through these processes and to start to adopt some of these things and have them in my training, and then have them work. It's like, it is frustrating learning it. It does suck to try to learn it and try to pick it up. But if it was having zero impact and it wasn't doing anything, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important. Your training has to feel good, right? You want to feel like you did something, like you made progress. Being sore is not a problem, but being banged up, that's a little different. So.
Yeah, what'd you think of the multi-hip machine at the Niners facility?
Yeah, that thing's sick.
I love that thing.
That one in particular was really nice.
Yeah, it was really tall.
Yeah, they had a lot of adjustments and stuff, just like one of those multi-hip, standard thing you see at like a Gold's Gym or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that one, everything they have is like, nothing they have is normal. Everything's like top of the line, some shit you never really seen before.
Yeah, but like when John was demonstrating like the movement of our, I guess, hip or leg, he was coming all the way up and then all the way back, saying that like we don't traditionally do that in the gym. With that machine, that's exactly what you do. And it's such a awesome, like there's no way to isolate the glute quite as well as that machine can. Because everything else, you're going to use something somewhere else, except for on that machine.
That machine's dope.
Yeah, I got like a home one, but it's not as nice because it's like a plate loaded one. So once gravity is done, like the other arm, so like once that's like vertical, then the tension comes off. So I have to figure out a way how to like set up bands on it. It'll be sick though.
All right, Andrew, take us on out of here, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. We sincerely appreciate it. Please make sure you guys slap that like button on the way out and subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already. And please follow the podcast at MB Power Project on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. My Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter is at I am Andrew Z. And before I forget, Mark Bell, thank you so much for yesterday's trip. That was like the most amazing thing ever. We'll talk about it more about the 49ers facility trip, but that shit was beyond incredible. So thank you so much for letting me tag along. Sincerely appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Nsima, where you at?
At Discord. Check it out. So links in the description. Community in there's popping. Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube. Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. Ryan, where can people find you?
You can get me on Instagram at CrossFit Northgate.
Cool.
Just at CrossFit Northgate.
Perfect.
Yeah, yesterday was pretty spatial. I just been a huge football nerd since the time I was a kid, and the strength coach has taken us through all these different spaces. He takes us to the training center where they have weights and sleds and just a normal weight room stuff. But it's the 49ers, so it's out of control. Like everything, multi-million-dollar facility, turf everywhere, and just really cool, and exceptional athletes all over the place and stuff like that too. Then we get kind of taken into each different kind of department. He shows us like where they eat, and he shows us some offices and just taking us through. And then we get to like this area where they have the trainers working with some people that have injuries and things. They got the cold tubs and the saunas and all these different things. And then we go into this other room, and I hit my nephew. He's like 11. I hit him. I like start poking at him. I said, "We're going to go into the stadium. That's what's going to happen here." And we go through the next thing, and the guy's like, "Here's where the coach would give the speech, get everyone all fired up. They got the music going, they get the smoke, and then he's like, and then you come through here, and you come out, and boom." And so I recorded it. I gotta play it later. He just didn't know how to react. He like started looking at the ground and stuff because he was like, he was just so fired up. He just thought it was amazing. But we're such knuckleheads too.
I mean, but like even
we were all fired up too.
Checking out the locker room, dude. Like I forgot to breathe. You know, like I was just in there. Like I was just like, whoa. Like I couldn't believe that I was standing in that same room as all these, you know, great athletes. But yeah, when he's like, yeah, this is where the players line up right before they head on. Like, dude, my heart was just pounding. I'm like, are we seriously about to walk through the fucking tunnel right now? And then sure enough, we just kept going. I was like, oh my god. And then walking on the field, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was great to walk on the field. It was sick just to see those guys. They're just sitting there. They're just, you know, they're eating nutritious food, and they're all into their game, and it's just.
And
it's
how
awesome.
jacked was Dre Greenlaw?
Everyone's all jacked. People are all jacked.
So jacked.
Yeah. Yeah, he's big. That was the guy that's.
That was the first guy that we met.
That was terrifying.
He's so jacked.
That fucking guy's huge.
And then he came out and he was asking the coach, he's like, Coach, you see this gold chain laying around somewhere? And I was like, ah, shit. Like, I promise I didn't take anything.
Did you see that chain he was wearing?
No, I didn't see it.
Oh, dude.
I'm trying to stay
You look
far
like
away
our the chains that we have in
Holy
here.
shit.
20-pound fucking chains. It was huge.
How tall is this dude?
He had to be 6'5" or 6'6". Let's see if we can bring up a picture of him real quick. I'm going to send that to you.
Yeah. But
he's 320 pounds.
Dre Greenlaw. I don't know if he was that tall, but dude,
He's 9,000 feet tall.
Yeah. Let me see. I can't find no physique. He's
Look how big he is right there. I mean, he is standing on something that makes him a little taller than what he actually is, but he's just a fucking giant. My brother-in-law is like 6'3" or 6'4".
Oh, I saw that picture.
Yeah, I showed it to you. Yeah, he's a monster. And if you zoom in, like, look at his arms.
Looks big.
Dude, he's so
He's
jacked.
huge.
Yeah, but then him and Fred Warner, fucking tall, and he was benching 315. Like, just kind of. I mean, I probably shouldn't even be saying that, but like he was
Hypothetically, if he was working out.
If he was working out next to me doing bicep curls, he was potentially doing 315 for reps. I was like, damn, like making it look easy too.
I just texted you that picture. See if you can just pull it up for a second.
I'd have to email it to my
I
friend.
know. It's always all complicated. It's always all complicated.
My bad.
Anyway, that was great having you here today, and it was sick to have you here and communicating with Gary Scheffler, the GOATA guy, and then we also had John Mills here, who practices more functional patterns, and I just wanted to try to bring people together. I think it's fun, and Gary was like, oh, I wonder kind of why do they think that, and he's like, I'm going to talk to him more privately, because no one's trying to like out anyone, no one's trying to be disrespectful, but I would love to see us to be able to get, someone like Nadi Aguilar, get him on the podcast and get him on the show with somebody that opposes a lot of his theories, a lot of his information. I mean, we'll do that to him anyway when he's here to try to get the best out of him. But I think what I'm finding is there seems to be tons of similarities between a lot of these things, more so than there are differences.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see it unfold over time. I think that,
You're right.
it's definitely heading somewhere.
Right.
And it's cool. The platform right here, it's like for gymnastics and stuff.
Yeah,
like they just bounce around on that. It's like a big old soft,
bouncy,
squishy
and
trampoline.
a big old trampoline behind him.
Yeah. Alrighty.
All right. I'm at Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.